strategic on their part to kind of throw everyone against the wall and see if somebody sticks, because they know that they can always bundle those delegates and go for a contested convention. Tom Perez walked out of the Unity Conference in 2017, literally saying, we're going to field more candidates than the GOP did in 2016. Oh, and by the way, fun fact, the DNC hasn't had a contested convention since 1972. How weird would it be if all these candidates that we're fielding wound up creating the conditions for a contested convention?
Oh, guys, I guess I gotta throw this in before we get to the emails, especially because, you know, the emails start this whole fiasco of interference and impeachment. And here we are today. I didn't watch all of it, but I watched Nadler introduce it. I watched the opposition, and then I watched Schiff. And obviously, the articles of impeachment are now going to the Senate after a month holdup time after it was so urgent. Now, here's how I feel about this, and I don't think anyone's really talking about it. I think that they're going to now try to stretch out the legal ramifications of the entire thing, point by point, person by person, so that the actual impeachment trial in the Senate does not even begin for possibly 4 to 7 months. If that's the case, all of a sudden this election is a totally different thing, because what if the Democrats can get a hold of the Senate and by the time they vote on it, it's flipped? Who knows? Maybe it's another 12 months. This whole process has been so crazy. And because I don't think they have a candidate on that side other than Bernie Sanders, who has that cult of personality that could beat Trump that they want in there, what else are their options? Pete Buttigieg, superhero. Hillary Clinton comes in. Elizabeth fucking Warren, that's not an option. I'm just sorry. There's no way she gets voted as president. Tell me I'm missing something, guys.
Well, there's something, real quick, there's something else to that. We just delivered the articles of impeachment today, and that is it pulls Bernie off the campaign trail. Granted, it does the same for Elizabeth Warren, but we've seen where she's at nationally polling. But they're going to keep Bernie from doing events by having him have to be in the Senate every single day that they're running through these articles of impeachment. Go ahead, Christy.
Oh, so I was just going to say, so Jason's theory is maybe that they're holding this impeachment over into, so it spills over into after the election. That way, if Trump does win, they still have this kind of, this card they can play because they don't have a candidate that's strong enough to beat him.
Could you even continue an impeachment through a presidential election? Like, once he's reelected, isn't?
Listen, look at Rand Paul. Rand Paul right now is introducing articles to just try to get Hunter Biden to be a witness in this whole fiasco. Well, if Hunter Biden is going to be a witness in this fiasco, I would assume the prosecutor that got fired because his father was sitting there in front of the Council on Foreign Relations could also be called. So there'll be all sorts of legal ramifications on whether actual foreign entities and foreign ambassadors, dignitaries, government officials are able to come over and be involved in our impeachment process. You got to remember, they impeached this guy on a fucking made up thing, 2 of them, but the second one being obstruction of Congress. I mean, they couldn't even get him on obstruction of justice with their Russiagate fiasco. They went with obstruction of Congress. We're in new territory. That's how I feel about it. But I'm the conspiracy guy, guys. By the way,
no. And to have
no. I am because of the Daily Beast, right?
That's you. That's right, Steve. We did that one earlier this week.
Yeah, and then Tim Pool's bitch ass sat there and likened me to QAnon for about 5 straight minutes before immediately transitioning to why he had to flee Venezuela when he was trying to cover it because everybody thought he was an intelligence asset there. It's been a fun week, man. It has. I gotta say, it's been an interesting week.
So with that being said, you want to transition into these emails? You want me to bring up this this Gateway Pundit, which has kind of a point by point of what some of the DNC emails actually revealed right there. I mean, this is a list, and God bless the internet and God bless WikiLeaks, but you just click on it, and guess what? You get to see the actual email, Andrew. 2020, it's here. You can see corruption firsthand. You don't have to go to a media spin source. And the guy that kind of facilitated this happens to be in a prison being tortured 23 hours a day and not able to see his legal team and maybe extradited to this country illegally.
So yeah, a couple of things I want to start with pointing out are the first three ones involving the media here. It's the DNC requesting a poll of an MSNBC commentator segment, DNC controlling the narrative with time release stories, and DNC creating false Trump information and releasing it with Reuters. Because that really kind of sums up the situation for what's going on here more so than most others. And so if we could get those up, we can kind of dig through them to see what it'll actually pull up so we can go through it line by line here.
You want to do the Reuters one first, and what was the other one?
The Reuters one, and then the DNC requesting to pull an MSNBC commentary segment.
And then the poll one. Just give me 1 second. Just keep talking. I'll have it up in a second.
Yeah. So basically, once you get into it, it says we can pull the commentary segment right now on MSNBC, talking about the DNC and the relationship between DNC and the Clinton campaign. I will, with rushed transcript, please, once it's wrapped up. And that was the Deputy National Press Director speaking to the Communications Director of the DNC about literally just contacting a news organization to pull a story that they didn't like. The other one here is an interview request. That's the title of it. And this is the one where they're talking about essentially creating the false story around Donald Trump's campaign with Reuters. So the corruption's literally just right out in the open. Everything that's happening and playing out on the DNC stage is just as scripted as it was when Donna Brazile was passing debate questions over. So I just think that that's the most important thing to try to point out here to people is even with the whole who's right, who's wrong, what actually happened, the larger thing to remember is that this entire process is rigged and controlled by the oligarchs that want us to be talking about it in a specific and framed way.
Well, I absolutely agree with you, man. And it shows also the controlled access that the press does, the pay to play, and the coordination. You know, I mean, you talk about Donna Brazile. You know, I wish that she would talk about these issues more. And what do you think about that? You know, Donna Brazile comes out. She obviously dedicates her book to Seth Rich in a moment of, I think, fear. But then after the fact, man, it's like business as usual. I've got a job in the media elsewhere. Everything's hunky-dory. Why not, you know, own up to the fact that this is dangerous and shine a light on that very important issue? And I think that's what's really wrong with any of these people in the mainstream press that have that, what appears to be come to God moment. Like when Keith Olbermann had that come to God moment that there weren't weapons of mass destruction. But then all of a sudden, it's the Obama administration and everything's fucking hunky-dory. In Syria, we got to be there, you know? And then you look at like now, Tucker Carlson keeps having these come-to-God moments where he's the only one talking about WikiLeaks and the OPCW. But is he going to turn our backs on us if Hillary, you know, I mean, or not Hillary, I don't know. I just can't fucking trust anybody, Andrew.
And that's the worst part, is it's all designed for us to just be misinformed and to be arguing. And that's why sources and international bodies like WikiLeaks are so important, because they give us the like real and accurate information about what's going on. So using them as like the starting point while having political conversations is just so vital, because you see all these articles being made by all these different people countering what happened at the debate and all that, but none of them are talking about how the DNC will just openly rig a campaign and then pretend like nothing happened and blame it on a foreign power and create this entire cycle of censorship simply because WikiLeaks released their own words and they're embarrassed by them.
Well, I think this is a good moment to endorse your GoFundMe, because I'm going to have to get out of here shortly. You guys are trying to go to not only DC, but London during these extradition hearings. You are about $2,000 shy of your goal. Obviously, it is not cheap for travel there, but seeing as you guys are really the only ones in the country consistently reporting on this issue along with Dak Rillo, How can people support you not only through the GoFundMe, but other means, Andrew?
So the biggest thing, the GoFundMe is our only way to support us, and that's to help get us to help get Taylor and Steve to London to cover Julian's extradition hearing live outside of Belmarsh, and to help get Christy and I to DC for the week, with all of the protests that we have planned and all the different groups that we're organizing with. If you don't want to donate to us, it's okay. I won't be mad at you. Donate to the Courage Foundation. Donate to Chelsea Manning directly. She's being fined $1,000 a day right now. Or just buy shirts, go on the WikiLeaks shop. And if that's how you want to make your contributions, so you get something back. That's never a bad way to do it either.
And if you
And
don't want to
from-
donate, at least share our GoFundMe on social media. It helps to get it more exposure. One of the things we've been talking about for DC is to potentially get one of the trucks that has the big Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning sign on, if we can get the money to. So I mean, not only is this going to pay for lodging, our airplane tickets, but we would like to use the money to help with these protests, and with that, you know, paper banners and printing flyers, and yeah, if we can get the Julian Mobile there, that would be an amazing feat too. And you know, Taylor and Steve are trying to go to London, and London isn't cheap either to fly from the US. And so we are all doing this voluntarily on our own time, and so we want to be very transparent with you how we use the money, but we do need your help too.
Yeah,
And
and from December till we leave in February, all of the super chats that Slow News Day gets will be going towards this too. So there's another way you can contribute. Yes, YouTube takes a cut, but if you have qualms about donating to GoFundMe or whatever, you know, and you're hanging out in my chat, you throw a super chat at it, and that will go to the GoFundMe as well.
Yeah, and thank you so much for that, Steve. I appreciate that. Jason, you said you have to go. Thank you so much for joining us. I also want to point out, I don't think we had an opportunity to show it this evening, but the Convo Couch, our friends at the Convo Couch, Fiorella and Pasta, have really been making an effort to ask candidates about Julian Assange and to cover this issue. And I'm really grateful for their really working hard to do that. And I believe earlier tonight, about a half hour ago, they were playing a clip of a candidate saying that Julian Assange was a hero. And so highlighting this work is super important. Dak Rouleau has been doing this for some time now, and his work is greatly appreciated. And the fact that other independent media is picking up on this as well is wonderful. And I want to give a big shout out to our friends at the Convo Couch for that. We see that, and we're really happy that you guys have been holding these candidates accountable. And Jason, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
All right, thanks, guys. We'll see you guys on the flip. All right, everybody.
All right. So while we're on the subject of the DNC email leaks, I did have a couple that I wanted to pull up. Is this the one? No, is this the one? Yes, absolutely. So let me go ahead and grab the share screen here, because this correlates with what we were talking about in terms of media collusion. This is, let's go ahead and get it up. From Mark Pastenbaugh to Luis Miranda. This is direct communication with CBS, telling them, the DNC is telling them, we would like you to edit your poll. We'd like to replace the second bullet under the CBS poll with this one. The note in the new bullet indicates the problem that we don't have the right data. It's a long bullet, but it's factually correct thought. And so they go through this long ass bullet point, convincing CBS to manipulate a poll so that they can go ahead and drive home the narrative that that Hillary Clinton is both viable and electable, and not, you know, a psychotic lizard person.
And I mean, how many polls have they made that they just hand tailor it? How many polls do they release where they only call people over 76 with landlines at home between the hours of 12 and 2? So that way they can get specific results. And then how many of those polls do they have to do these little tricks on? I mean, that's how they kept Tulsi out of the third debate, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Trying to pull
Right.
up.
And, you know, I stepped out for a little while, so I feel bad I wasn't really present when Jason was on. But tonight we do want to talk about these DNC leaks, of course, because I have a feeling that we may be subjected to the same type of behavior here once again. I think, Andrew, I remember it was one of our first interactions with each other, and you brought up, I don't know how I missed this in the DNC leaks, but you told me about these spirit cooking dinners that they were referencing, which was super creepy.
There's a lot of weird language
There's
in
such weird
these
shit in there.
emails, and no one has ever explained it. That's the thing is it's there's a lot of weird language. There's obviously some sort of code going on. And no one has, as far as I'm concerned, I don't know if you guys have seen otherwise, nobody's explained that from the DNC, you know, and I think the Podesta emails maybe have a little bit more, but yeah, have you guys ever seen anybody actually try to explain that?
Right after the Podesta emails came out, there were a couple of people that were in the mainstream media that were like, okay, so what's spirit cooking? And they tried to make it sound like it was this artistic performance,
Right.
that you know, there was nothing nefarious about the ritualistic sacrifice that it represents. Nothing incredibly you know, we're summoning Baal or anything like that. They tried to make it sound like, you know, something that anybody could come to, this, you know, mock ritualistic sacrifice that also involves drinking blood and like cannibalism. It's gnarly.
I think there's bull semen that they mix with blood and breast milk to make like some concoction that they then paint with and draw with.
I don't even know, man.
Yeah.
and like,
That's its own like beautiful rabbit hole. Like it's crazy.
You know, we have seen people in the elite ruling class, even with Epstein too, be involved in these sort of like weird ritualistic behaviors. And I remember you pointed this out to me, Andrew, once again, and I thought it was something that was bizarre, but after looking at this, I think there's something to it. And as Christy was saying, because this hasn't been mentioned before, and there's been no normal explanation to this, to me, it seems that there's something really odd taking place. Because I think there's an easy explanation that this is perhaps code language for something else, but nobody was expecting others to be seeing these emails at the same time.
If you look at the timelines, if you go to Google Trends and put fake news back to 2016 and Pizzagate back to 2016, those two things start at the same time, and then one of them is used to faithfully push down the other. So that's one thing that we can look into.
Well, and the whole thing about Pizzagate is that it was to take people's eye off of the fact that it was becoming more and more reported that, yes, there are, as a matter of fact, pedophiles in very high places, both in government and in business and in media. And it was the distraction. Let's make this about Comet Pizza and not about John Podesta or Jeffrey Epstein or Harvey Weinstein or Kevin Spacey or the Nexium cult. Like it, the way that the fake news thing, that narrative went about was particularly nefarious, because we all know that U.S. state television, cable news, you know, the major networks function as a PR firm for the people in power. And we had Karika Dodd on Sunday. If you guys missed that show, please at some point dedicate like 15 hours of your life to it. But he was very adamant on not wanting to indict his colleagues while faced with the very stark reality that Newsweek wouldn't print his accurate reporting on the OPCW leaks. And while that is a valid point, the overall management at these networks serves a different agenda than what the reporters do. Am I making sense there on that?
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Because you see it with the way that they structure themselves. They'll either own the institution from the top down. Best example being the Washington Post, owned by Jeff Bezos, who's like head contractor for the CIA. And then you see it in other ways, like with CNN and MSNBC, where they own the anchors directly, because it's way easier to own the newsman than it is to own the news studio. So it's kind of like a two-pronged approach that they have, where they'll either own the whole institution, or in the case that it's too big, they'll own the people directly involved with the decision-making and reporting process.
Yeah, while we're on the subject, I should pull it up. There is a DNC email right here to Phil Griffin, who was the president, and I think still is the president at CBS. And the subject is, you know, off the record meeting with Phil Griffin, president of MSNBC. Why does a private political club need to go ahead and have off record meetings with the president of a network? The idea, and this kind of goes back to what we were talking about with Jason, but the idea that these primaries, let alone a general election, is a free and fair exercise of our fundamental civic obligations and duties, let alone our, something that we should strive for everyone in our community to do. When you've got an organization like the DNC, which, as we know from the DNC fraud lawsuit, is a private organization that is not bound to follow its own rules or its own charters. When we've got that outlet meeting with heads of networks off the record, you're not going to vote your way out of an oligarchy.
But the oligarchy will convince you that you can, and that's the dangerous part. Is they know what people think and how they feel through their social media interactions and the people that they talk to. That there's literally an entire industry built around targeting you as inexpensively as possible based on the interests that you express, and they use that specifically to manipulate your political views.
And not only that, but there's was it Vault 7 that had the this is how individuals can be targeted and have their news feeds manipulated so that you can basically be driven mad or be driven to only reach the conclusions that they want you to reach?
Yeah, I believe it was Vault 7 that showed that. And then if that doesn't work, right, then they have their backup plans with things like, what was it, Correct the Record, I believe the institution was called back in 2016, that
Yeah.
folded and used its money to immediately open a new organization. So those bots are still out there. They've never went away. Nothing changed. It's literally Americans trying to psychologically attack Americans, as Jason Burmis points out, but as Gordon on Sunday said, we're in an information war.
Absolutely. So Correct the Record was one of the more nefarious. This is like the second or third time tonight I've used that word. I won't use it anymore, I promise. But it was one of those things where, like, right as we were being told that Russian trolls and Russian bots were responsible from everything to Donald Trump to like the fact that your tire went flat this morning, we then find out that, oh, and by the way, the DNC had like 3 separate troll farms, and there was Sally Albright's troll farm, and there was David Brock's, and Peter Dow was in on a lot of this shit. Peter Dow now, super woke progressive because he has a book to sell and a seat in Congress that he's angling for. I really didn't mean to be a downer about, voting and shit, but I think this is something that people need to realize. Like 2016 isn't over. They're still relitigating it today because of the crap that Elizabeth Warren pulled. But 2020 is 2016 on steroids without Julian Assange at the helm of WikiLeaks, without the comfortability people had with leaking to that organization. God bless the OPCW leakers
And that's
because
why I think
they're showing.
I was
Go
going to say,
ahead.
that's why I think treating the WikiLeaks emails from 2016 as relevant and like essentially going through them as modern news stories and just subbing out people's names figuratively, not literally, but hey, this is what we learned in 2016 from WikiLeaks. This is what's happening right now. This is their political strategy, and just lay it out on the table flat and plain and simple on a largest stage as possible.
I think when we talk about these emails, we also have to talk about what happened in the media to subdue so many people against really uprising and getting upset about this. There was the core Bernie people that refused to fall in line and vote for Hillary, but there was really a concerted effort with the media to play these down, to convince everybody that the content of these emails was not important, that maybe it was perhaps they were written by Russians too. Not only were they leaked by Russians, but like we had said before, there was no explanation on this coded language. So there was really, the American people should have been an uprising over this. There should have been more of an outrage in 2016, and the fact that there's not, and still today, that nobody's been held accountable for the corruption that was going on, I think says a lot about our society in this country. And I'm not sure what it's going to take for them to really rise up and get pissed off enough to rise up. And like you said, we can't vote our way out. Like when is it going to be enough? When are we going to have enough proof to finally show what is happening?
I think the outrage is there, but it just manifests in people not giving a fuck because they have so many other things that they worry about on a daily basis. Like, it's hard for me to keep up, and I do this. Like, I try to read and find as much as I can, and it's still not the easiest thing to do. So I can only imagine being someone who doesn't involve themselves as heavily trying to get real information isn't the easiest.
And I definitely understand that, but there's enough people on the left that were involved, that knew about these and knew what came out with these, that fell for the Russiagate narrative and dismissed WikiLeaks, dismissed Julian Assange, and really
Because
fell
Bernard Jesus Sanders hasn't said his fucking name.
right. And so
That's why.
We have the very man who was the target of this corruption that won't speak out against it, that fell in line with them, that kissed the ring, that went to, what was it, 38 events to prop Hillary up. And he even said last night he will help whatever man or woman it is that gets the nomination to move forward to beat Trump. So we know he's not going to stand up to the DNC. We know he's not going to say Julian Assange's name. Yeah, and so if the guy that was cheated out of the nomination in 2016 won't do it, why should anybody else?
And
He's the only one that
why
has an incentive to do it. Everyone else on that stage has an incentive to protect those secrets, to want to see Julian Assange extradited and put in a hole for 175 years because they're just as fucking corrupt.
Right. And you know what? An important point about this is putting the pressure on candidates without being too harsh about it. And I'm not saying that we have been too harsh, but without being sort of ignorant to the candidates about it. But, the reason why we've been putting pressure on Bernie Sanders is for the reasons that Christy had outlined, which is the fact that, and Steve has outlined, is the fact that Sanders was completely vindicated in these leaks, and he should be thanking Assange for this. And other people will argue, well, It's going to make him look like a sore loser, and we see that all the time. Or he can't say anything because he'll look like he's still whining over 2016. But for us, we see that as, there's no excuse for him not to say anything, because Julian Assange is unfortunately dying in prison right now, and we don't have the time to wait. And also, it's irrational to believe that Bernie Sanders will have the gumption and the guts and the bravery to stand up against the military-industrial complex and all of the intelligence community once he's in office, and against the Democratic and Republican establishment. That just seems like a huge leap to me.
The big thing, too, the people saying those things that, oh, if Bernie Sanders fights back, he's going to be a sore loser, or he's just going to be relitigating 2016. They're either paid trolls for a troll farm, people completely misinformed, waving Team Blue no matter who, or someone who's just a blatant warmongering neoliberal blue checkmark. So I don't think that it's unreasonable to say, shut the fuck up to those people. Like, I think at the end of the day, those people are just there to interrupt the process of revolutionary change within the country, however it happens.
100%.
Because that's the compromise that Sanders made. He basically said, hey, you let me keep doing what I'm doing, and I'll stop the revolution right now. Like they said,
he had a chance in 2016 to create an entire progressive party, and he had a perfect opportunity to do that and to run as a third party candidate. He could have done that, and he chose not to do that.
He couldn't have gone anywhere running as a third-party candidate. The fact of the matter is you have to be on the ballot in states by a certain time, and in some cases that's like a year and a half prior. So if you're going to launch a legitimate third-party movement, which is what he had all of the tools and all of the opportunity to do, yes, 2016 was absolutely the time for him to say, you know what, they couldn't have made it any more clear that they don't want these kinds of policies and ideas in their party. They're not going to treat them seriously. They're not going to treat you seriously. Let's all get together over here and have this people's party.
Because as terrible as everything is in the passage of time and the destruction of institutions, fighting back in 2016 and doing what Steve literally just outlined allows you to replace in 2017 and 2018 and 2019 congressional seats, state level House of Representative and Senate seats, governorships, local school boards and mayoral positions, and build a national coalition of people fighting for this at the ground level outside of a corrupt architecture design. The architecture is designed to keep people from having an influence, and pulling people into that, saying, hey, we can change it, without leading people to run for key positions within the party, and without rallying people more and more and more to function outside of it and build power as a community or in any framework outside of the actual two-party system, is just the most dishonest thing someone can do. And for a candidate with that much power to have been shown in the open, hey, here is all of the evidence that you have been cheated, and to just turn and walk away and act like the entire process is legitimate, just, they're not an ally. Like, at the end of the day, at this point in time, it's been 4 years of nothing but silence as the situation got worse and worse and worse, simply because the quest for personal political power was greater than the quest to actually bring truth to the world for certain individuals.
And more to that point, the only person who was there on the ground for 2016 and all of the just fuckery, who did something about it, was Tulsi Gabbard. First, she resigned from vice chair of the DNC, and that, regardless of what she's done since, will always be her ultimate and original sin. And everything that has happened to her and to her legislation from that point on is a result of that decision. But Tulsi Gabbard is the only person who introduced legislation that would have addressed election fraud and addressed having free and fair elections with the OFAC. She introduced it 2 different times. It had 0 co-sponsors. There was no companion bill in the Senate. You know who could have written a companion bill in the Senate to that? The guy who got the primary stolen from him. For that matter, any of Hillary Clinton's allies or minions in the House and Senate who genuinely thought that Russia hacked our freedom and our election may have been interested in securing the electoral system. But no. And look, if anyone in Washington, D.C. was concerned about us having free and fair elections, there would be legislation introduced every single day of the week to address it. But Emma Goldman was right when she said if voting changed anything, they'd make it illegal. Oh, everybody's in the group and try to figure out what we're going to switch to next.
Yeah, sorry. I just sent another article. But so to be clear, there is a point where democracy is functional. And that is currently in most places at the local level, because that is where you can have the most accountability. So I think in this whole conversation, we can't lose track of that the person that's rigging the elections and saying, yes, we'll use these electronic voting machines is someone in a local position that Tim Canova showed us is vulnerable and can be exposed. And all it takes is someone willing to step up to have essentially the shit beat out of them, to be willing to expose the system in that way. Because I guarantee you it's as corrupt in Orange County, California, as it is in Miami, Florida, as it is in Cleveland, Ohio, as it is in anywhere else across the country. So it's just a matter of getting that out in the open and showing people and getting the community to actually care that their local election is rigged.
So I'm going to go ahead and pull up the email that you got here because it is kind of correlative to what you're talking about. Let's bring it back up to the top here for a second. This is to National Press Secretary and Deputy Communications Director, Mark Paustenbach. In the days before Hillary Clinton launched an unprecedented big money fundraising vehicle with state parties last summer, she vowed to rebuild our party from the ground up because she proclaimed when state parties are strong, we win. But less than 1% of the 61 million raised by that effort has stayed in the state party's coffers, according to a Politico analysis of the latest Federal Election Commission filings. The venture, the Hillary for Victory Fund, is a so-called joint fundraising committee comprised of Clinton's presidential campaign, the Democratic National Committee, and 32 state party committees. The setup allows Clinton to solicit checks of up to $350,000 or more from her super rich supporters at extravagant fundraisers, including a dinner at George Clooney's house and a concert at Radio City Music Hall, featuring Katy Perry and Elton John. Can you imagine? The Victory Fund has transferred $3.8 million to state parties, but almost all of that cash, $3.3 million or 88%, was quickly transferred to the DNC, usually within a day or two, by the Clinton staffer who runs the committee. By contrast, the Victory Fund has transferred $15.4 million to Clinton's campaign and $5.7 million to the DNC. At most of the $23.3 million spent directly by the Victory Fund has gone towards expenses that appear to have directly benefited Clinton's campaign. This is worth fleshing out a little bit because, okay, the Justice Department just closed an investigation on Hillary Clinton's foundation. But to this day, no one has gone after the Hillary for Victory Fund. And this is her money laundering vessel from state party donations directly into Elizabeth Warren None.
Or
Because
Donald Trump for that
any
matter.
repercussions.
And that's why they don't want to stop it. That's why they won't go after it. It's because they all use it. It's legal. It's extra legal money laundering as long as no one has a problem with it being done. It's the same way that you have to kind of just assume that super PACs and campaigns aren't actually coordinating, that there's no joint marketing or anything like that going on behind the scenes because there's some law that says, no, they're not allowed to talk, even though it's like the thinnest veil that can possibly be put between the actual campaign.
Allowed to have a super PAC that she could communicate with. You remember that? I can't remember the name of the super PAC offhand. I'm kind of kicking myself because of that. But they're one of her PACs she was allowed to communicate with. AOC just started a super PAC. Did everybody know that? Was everybody?
Yeah. Has there been an actual reason she's given on why she's suddenly starting a PAC?
I don't know. I'm sure it's bullshit. I'm
Right.
sure it's high dollar, jazzy, progressive sounding bullshit.
So it's probably because her whole campaign structure with the Justice Democrats and brand new Congress fell through because it more or less got exposed as a high-class money laundering scheme where they were getting money from all of these candidates together. And I worked for a company that was trying to help candidates out with marketing at the time. Like I have a whole list of every brand new Congress and Justice Democrat candidate because I tried getting a hold of them specifically to help them with fundraising because all of them were so broke. But brand new Congress and Justice Democrats, from my understanding, were taking money from each of the individual campaigns, funneling it up through that organization and then into a private corporation that was being marketed and funded and written off as campaign consulting services to the tune of millions of dollars.
Of the money that went to Justice Democrats for the 2018 election cycle paid salaries, consultants, and vendors. 80%. The remaining 18% was distributed in not like among candidates and a bunch of other things. But the majority of that money went to AOC's campaign, went to Ilhan Omar's campaign, and what's her name? The God damn it.
Amy Valola?
But the other quote unquote squad member. Ayanna Presley. I
was trying to think.
Her campaign, like a whopping $16 that if you go to Open Secrets now, that number's jumped up to like 260, which is still absolutely pathetic, to Paula Jean Swearengin.
And that's because she had a real chance of winning. That's because if they would have supported Paula Jean Swearengin, then you would have upset Joe Manchin.
She wasn't going to play Justice Democrats' game, which is defer to party leadership. Go ahead and vote to extend more protections to the CIA. Let's go ahead and have our token protest votes, but let's also make sure that we support PACO and Nancy Pelosi for Speaker of the House.
Right. While at the same time lying to people behind the scenes about supporting Tim Canova's campaign and being in contact with them and trying to basically literally shutting down the other portions of the progressive movement trying to build up candidates at the same time. So it's
if you watch like older episodes of Slow News Day. Like I realize the show isn't that old. I started in September of 2018. But if you go back and you watch that shit, I'm talking about this. I'm talking about the corruption in Justice Democrats. I'm talking about who Waleed Shahid is. I'm talking about like all of this is all part of what I've been trying to get out there. And I caught so much shit for that, for speaking ill of the Just Us Democrats. Oh my God, dude.
Well, of course you did. They were women and women of color, and they were the new saviors of the Democrat Party at the time. So
look,
how dare you speak ill of them?
And to be very clear, they are the saviors of the Democratic Party. They are, just like how I called it in 2016 and 2018, They are the rebranded face of the zombie war criminal government that we have right now.
Yeah,
They are
never
making
there.
fighting Donald Trump cool. They are the hipster that danced on the roof to High School Musical music and shit like that. Like, it is a psychological operation designed to pull people into the Democratic Party. And like, it's just crazy that more people don't treat it like that, because these people aren't heroes. They literally got into office, sold everything out that progressives stood for, and people still support them.
The marketing says that they're there to wrest power away from the establishment, and they're there to assume the power of the establishment. That's all it is a transition of the face of what the Democratic Party is. And they need to hit all of those identity politics check boxes. They need to win identity politics bingo, and they need to be able to have 4 to 10 people who say exactly what progressives want to hear most of the time, who have achieved this rock star or hero or cult of personality status, so that you'll forgive all of their horrific bullshit if you even ever hear about it, because you live in a fucking bubble. The progressive bubble is one of the more irritating ones. It really is, because they all think they don't live in a bubble. And like, speak the truth about Bernie Sanders. Watch what happens.
And so a great example about how progressives sell out the people that they try to get to actually support them and donate to them. Abdul Al-Sayed in Michigan was running in the primary against Gretchen Whitmer. The Green candidate at the time was trying to organize alongside of him, because everyone kind of knew the rigging was coming. I was working with a candidate running in southern Michigan for a state house position in a district that she had lived in her entire life. She shook hands and knew everybody. She had worked there. It was literally like the most layup Democratic primary when you could have, because the other person was literally just a lobbyist funded, never challenged candidate, right? So Gretchen Whitmer's dad was the head of some big, I believe, Anthem Blue Cross and Blue Shield, but I might be wrong. But the head of a big insurance company, right? And that was part of like the thing that Abdul first ran on, like threw that mud at her. She shot it down as like, oh, that's sexist. The primary's openly rigged. If you were involved in the Michigan primary, you'll know it. Nico House put videos out about it. They called in, the DNC called in the big dogs to help them actually scrub, switch district, get Republicans winning primaries and Democrats winning primaries that are both corporate friendly, because the corruption doesn't know party lines. That's just an illusion that we're given. And long story short, Abdul Al-Sayed, instead of fighting with the progressive caucus that he helped build and say, no, this was rigged against me and all of these people, he just endorsed Gretchen Whitmer, campaigned for, ran super hard, did more events than she did type thing in a lot of areas, and was the most hardcore campaign surrogate. She wins on her transition team. She gets someone from Anthem Blue Cross and Blue Shield put directly into it after saying, no, I won't do that. And to this day is still supported by Abdul Al-Sayed while Michigan is being devastated. So I think that that's a really important thing to point out, that heroes that get made within the Democratic Party are not heroes because they're within the Democratic Party. I think we lost Steve.
We lost Steve. All right. Is there, well, I guess because Steve's been pulling up our emails, I was going to say if there's another email we wanted to talk about, transition to.
So I wanted to talk about the email where they tried to smear Bernie Sanders about his religion with Southern voters. Yeah. Because Super Tuesday, the big states, are a lot of big blue states, and smearing someone as a sexist to a neoliberal audience sways their opinion. The Ellen DeGeneres and Oprah voters, they're going to see that, and they're not going to care about the media spin. They're not going to care about the Mockingbird stories and the things that get run behind the scenes. They're just going to see Bernie Sanders thinks a woman can't be president.
Right.
So I think pointing out the smears that they've run in the past are really important, because it's literally Yeah, I put it into the show chat. I'll link it again.
Yeah.
There's like 9 billion links in the show chat.
It's at the bottom.
All right. Give me just a second and I will have that for you. And this is the is this where that Twitter dude, Mr. Weeks, got his fake F and Jew thing about Bernie Sanders?
Yeah.
All right.
Because these are the people that are still in power. Like, nothing's really changed. It was 5 or 6 people that got removed at the top, but these people are still writing articles.
All right. There we go. That's right. It's the Jesus thing. It might make no difference, but for Kentucky and West Virginia, can we get someone to ask his belief? Does he believe in a God? He had skated on saying he had Jewish heritage. I think I read he is an atheist. This could make several points difference with my peeps, my Southern Baptist peeps. Are you kidding me? Someone put the words Southern Baptist and peeps in the same sentence next to each other like it was a thing. Would draw a big difference between a Jew and an atheist. This is why internal emails are so much fucking fun to read and why WikiLeaks is the best organization ever to exist on the planet. Man.
So real quick, Steve, what groups do you think they would be trying to divide by calling Bernie Sanders a sexist?
I would imagine that would be men and women.
Yeah. The Women for Bernie, that's a pretty popular hashtag. I think it's directed to get at the female Bernie voters.
But could this also be a point of countervailing propaganda? Could it be the way that the institutions have to gear and change the machine to allow a Bernie Sanders to be selected to win the primary? If they want to make it seem like some of these anchors are on Bernie Sanders' side and that, oh, he's not that radical and, oh, that was a really dumb point, so let's try to find a way to defend him on CNN without actually allowing any substance into the conversation.
So just a few days before this Elizabeth Warren leak, or not leak really because it was an executed plan. There was also that fake what was it, phone banking script that supposedly Warren got a copy of, that like it was written and immediately removed from a Slack group or something like that. A few days prior to that, one of the guys who writes for CNN.com said, okay, while the polls are showing that Bernie Sanders is ahead right now, I say it's time to give him the vetting that Kamala Harris got when she was on top, or that Pete Buttigieg gets, or the blah blah blah. It was this call to arms for corporate media to really vet Bernie. And again, man, I'm in a position where I'm defending the guy, and I don't like being in that position. I really don't.
And that's the power of propaganda. Like, that's the power of a carefully crafted narrative to try to make heroes and continue the conversation around how great these people are and how they aren't something or are this other thing.
Look, I don't care who it is. If there's a coordinated effort going on to take out a political candidate that really honestly is barely trying to tinker marginally around the edges of capitalism and catch us up with where the rest of the world has been for 50 to 70 years, I'm going to talk about the coordinated effort to take out that candidate.
Oh, absolutely. But look, I just mean in the realm of the world that we live in, it could be an effort that is the same sort of effort as QAnon and Russiagate as far as countervailing propaganda to make you talk relative to the narrative that they're trying to put forward. So that's kind of my argument, is it may be a more coordinated effort than just the DNC getting Warren to say stupid shit. It could be them trying to more or less promote Bernie without directly promoting him, because they know if they do something like this, it'll be that noticeable and obvious, as a way to create him as like the FDR candidate that is able to tinker around the edges of capitalism, but ultimately doesn't stop the criminal war empire that they built.
No, that's
That's
legit.
assuming that, yeah, that they'd want to prop him up and that there
Right.
is some sort of.
So I've said this a few times on my show. And by the way, guys, if you're just seeing me for the first time, my name is Steve Boykin, and I host a show called Slow News Day. It's also here on the YouTube. I talk about all the kinds of shit that people with horse race shows don't. I do not use mainstream media as the baseline material for my content. I don't just hang out and wag my finger at the corporate media and then fucking shrug. So you should go check that out. But I've said a few times that if Bernie Sanders makes it through this primary unscathed in terms of, you know, them actually allowing the votes that he gets, not destroying ballots, not purging voters, not switching party affiliation at the last second, and, you know, all of that, I will trust him less than I ever have at any point in my entire life.
Yeah, I'd
Because
have to
that
agree
means
with
he's
that. That would be,
100% playing ball.
yeah, agreed.
Andrew, you got anything? Taylor, you're back.
Taylor's
Yeah, I'm back. I've been around. I've been listening to you guys, just working on some things on this end. So I'm really sorry about that. But I am back for the duration.
Well, welcome back. Do we want to move on to the next piece? Because I kind of said all I really want to say about Sanders.
Yeah.
Is there more DNC emails that we wanted to look at, or do we want to move on to some of the other parts?
Maybe just one moment.
Okay. I'm actually going to take a second. I will be right back.
All right. So we have, some more things to talk about. Again, I'm really sorry for kind of not being involved for the past little while now. But again, I want to thank everybody who has contributed to our GoFundMe. I'm really getting anxious for this hearing. I know my co-hosts are as well. And I want to thank everybody who has donated, who has contributed, who has circulated that link, and who has been supporting us and watching these vigils. It is greatly appreciated. And we do have quite a bit of work ahead of us. And I just want to thank everybody for helping us make this happen, because we could not do it without you. We really can't. The reason we are able to potentially go to London and DC is because of all of you. And we're doing it not only for Julian, of course, first and foremost, but to also inform you guys about the truth here. And, you're helping us make this happen, and we're grateful.
And just to put it in perspective, the money we've raised so far will probably be enough to cover the plane tickets traveling. We're getting real close to having that completely covered. So then, the next thing we want to be able to cover is our lodging, because we are going to be in our respective places. I think Taylor and Steve will probably be there a little over a week, just because they have a lot longer to travel, and we'll have the jet lag and getting used to a completely different time zone. And I believe Andrew and I will be in DC for a full week as well. And like we said before, though, that's not a cheap thing to do. And we are, splitting lodging and doing what we can to save money and trying to find the cheapest flights. So just to let you know what you're paying for and kind of our milestones that we're getting to. We would like to get to the next milestone or next goal. This week would be amazing if we can get that, and that way we have our plane tickets all paid for, and we can start moving on. And hopefully we will have some extra money so that we can use that for things like cameras and microphones, for interviews on the London side, and for different things for the protests on the DC side.
So I believe we do have that video clip ready, and this is from the Convo Couch, and I want to thank them for, once again, for making an effort to talk about Julian Assange. It's super cool that we were able to really encourage them to talk about this. Not that they already weren't talking about it, because they were doing a great job, but since meeting both of them, they've heard me speak about it, and they're really doing this, and I'm grateful for that, and it's some great work that they're doing. And we have that video ready. Thank you, Steve.
All right.
Last question, we'll get you out of here. We're not running out here. This is a tough one. Tell us how you feel about Julian Assange, his treatment, and what you think we should do for him going forward.
I think that Julian Assange is a hero. Okay. I think that we need to stand up and stand behind Julian Assange and the media, the free press. I think that this is more than just about Julian Assange. It's about literally our rights to information. Yeah. He needs to be pardoned. He needs to be released. Whatever needs to happen, he needs to be given the freedom. And I wholeheartedly support, any move to ensure that he's out and he's healthy. Because from what I'm hearing is that he's not in a good health state. So it's really concerning, and it's really, with Julian Assange and the other whistleblowers that we've been seeing in the last 4 years, and the attack on the free press, I think it's very, very concerning. And I think that we need to make sure that we are protecting freedom of speech. Even with speech that we don't agree with. I think that when we saw Alex Jones get censored, and people were very quick to okay, well, whatever. You have to make sure that, there was the poem with the hangman. They came for this guy, and I kind of made my business. They came for this other one, and eventually they came for me, and there was nobody to come, and defend me. Yeah. And I think that's where it comes down to, that we need to make sure that we're setting for the right things. It's not about what we're set on the issues. It's where are we standing on our freedoms and these greater issues. It's the big picture. Right. So we need to make sure that, as far as Julian Assange is concerned, that, we need to fight for his freedom. And, I think that WikiLeaks is something that has given us so many truth bombs that I think none of us have been able to fully digest it all. I think that we should be grateful to Julian Assange.
I love.
She hit it on the head.
I'm so happy when I see. My God, you made me so happy. I'm warm inside. The only thing I would say to push back a little bit, it wasn't just Donald Trump who jailed a lot of these whistleblowers the last 4 years. Obama, a lot of them. He had a lot of lawyers in his cabinet.
Absolutely, you're right.
Yeah, yes. I think even when it comes to caging of children, Donald Trump has just picked up on the work of President Obama, and a lot of people have a hard time speaking that truth.
All right.
Yeah, great response. We should, potentially try to get her on these vigils, but I, thought it was great. And I was happy to hear that she had knowledge on his current condition as well, because like with Dak's work, he just recently interviewed Tom Steyer. Yep. A lot of these candidates say they have no idea, they don't know enough information, they can't comment on the case, which I think is probably a bullshit excuse.
It is. It's completely bullshit that this case has been going on for a decade, and we have people running for the highest political office in the land, and they have no idea. We're 9 months away from the election, and they still have no idea. We're, a little over a month away from the extradition hearing beginning. And they have no clue that the U.S. is pursuing a publisher and journalist for 175 years.
Yeah, it's so ridiculous. I think that it's just a way to dodge the question. It's either that they dodge the question, or when Dak asked them, they have a very scripted answer. I saw that with, or I got that feeling with Beto O'Rourke's response and with Michael Bennett's response.
Mm-hmm. Michael Bennett's especially. Dak called him out on his participation in the letter to Mike Pence to encourage Ecuador to remove asylum from Assange, and he really pivoted away from acknowledging that he was even part of the 10 Democratic senators that signed that. But yeah, definitely the last 3 or 4 candidates that Dak has asked, and I got to ask Deval Patrick, really seemed to be following this script of, I don't know enough about this case, and not really giving a full comment on it, and just feigning this ignorance basically to it.
Do we want to play, I'm sure my co-hosts have some other responses, but are we going to play your video? Did we plan on that or no?
I think we could.
Real quick if we want to.
Throw it in the chat and I'll load it up.
So I was looking for the email we had looked at earlier, where it had the Hillary campaign basically like going to somewhere, and they like had it listed out as the talking points, and they said no talking points, private event. They get internal emails telling them what to say about these specific things. And it's actually not uncommon if you work for a political campaign, whether it's a progressive or a Green Party member or a libertarian or one of the establishment people. We work to collaborate talking points to counter questions and things that we know we're going to get asked. It's something that the candidates literally train on doing. So it seems like through Dak's work, you can more or less see the talking points that they're introducing and how they're testing them through different candidates, because they have these centralized consulting firms that they all use. So I think that that's something super important that you see through his work, is all of the people now starting to say the same thing because they have more aggregated information about how people will respond to what you say about Julian.
Definitely. And I just wanted to note the Convo Couch is hopefully coming to Iowa for the Iowa caucus. So we are hoping to collaborate with them. And we'll see if we can get to, they haven't really announced what candidates will be doing as far as events that weekend leading up to it. But yeah, we're starting to brainstorm and really hoping to do some good work covering the candidates here at the Iowa caucus. So I just wanted to add that.
Someone in the chat just made a good point and said, this is from Jen Joy 83. She said, I think the candidates only study the buzzword issues and don't study any real word. I agree with that, because I feel like sometimes they will say things and they'll like mention climate change, or they'll mention First Amendment or free speech. And it's almost as if they're like, okay, I could check mark that off the box of issues that I've named and superficially brought up and really didn't have anything to say of substance. I agree. I think that's a good point. That's part of, I guess, how politics works. And it's especially easy to do that during these debates when there's a limited amount of time to speak as well.
Having worked on campaigns, I can promise you that candidates will get their talking points for the day, will get their 30-second soundbite briefings on how they should frame an answer or respond to pose a question of their own. And everybody's blowing smoke up their ass. So every answer is a good answer. If you don't have, like, if you have to correct them on it, generally in either branch of the one money party, they're always going to be corrected to reinforcing the establishment position. So for any of these presidential candidates that have kind of the similar answer about Julian Assange, it's because some advisor or some consultant has already figured it out with the other advisors or consultants, and this is how we're going to frame it, and then we're going to pivot away to something immediately.
And ideas like this can actually be used for the good of humanity. If you're a candidate running for office that's trying to be able to answer questions that you're going to get asked as third-party candidates, like, oh, aren't you going to spoil X or Y election, and things like that. And it's something that I helped a Green Party candidate prepare for while she was getting ready for an interview with TYT on Rebel HQ. And it was literally answering that third-party question and being able to dodge to get back more on substance. So I think looking at things like this and examining how the establishment uses it if you're in a campaign to be able to structure the way that you give the substantive response is an incredibly powerful tool. So it should be something that we scoff at for the way that they use it to manipulate people, but it's something that can be used as a way to build your case and help you be able to communicate more effectively.
So yes, I think Steve's got the video ready. So I was in New Hampshire a couple weekends ago before we went to DC. I got to talk to Tulsi. I went to a Pete Buttigieg rally and stood outside with some Julian Assange signs with some of my coworker volunteer from Unity for J. And yeah, we got to attend a house party for Deval Patrick, who was entering the race a little bit late. And Dak wrote a really really great essay on kind of the synopsis of having him enter late and what his real mission is. So I got the pleasure of asking Deval Patrick about Julian Assange, and I think we're going to play that.
The Trump administration's war on journalism. In particular, the persecution of journalist and publisher Julian Assange, who has just said recently that he is slowly dying in prison. So what action specifically would you take as president to defend this journalist?
Well, I don't know enough about him to offer a point of view. Hello, Julian. But I think that the persecution of journalism and the twisting of the First Amendment so that it drives up, it justifies propaganda is wrong. And I think, what I can do is model a different behavior. Believe me, journalists made my life hard when I was governor, but that was their job. And the accountability necessary for successful democracy is a big part of what journalism is supposed to be about. So I totally get that part, and if that is consistent with what Mr. Assange is about, I hear that. But I'm not well enough informed about him to offer a solution for him or a promise for him today. Thank you.
Yeah, so Deval Patrick is definitely somebody kind of reminded me of Mayor Pete. He's trying to bridge this gap. He's trying to run on his results in Massachusetts.
Sorry.
He's trying to sell this very personable, different kind of politician. And I talked about this in Dak's essay about this particular house has hosted a lot of candidates, and Dak's actually gotten quite a few candidates' answers from this house that seems to host all of these Democrats. So it is a little intimidating to go into somebody's personal home that is a very, obviously very staunch Democrat. They have pictures all over the walls of all the different presidents and Democrats that they've met. And this was a pretty packed house. So knowing you're going to ask somebody this sort of what they see as a controversial question can be a little intimidating. Luckily, it's a little hard to feign interest too, I'll have to say, and kind of go along with the character of supporting these people. But I didn't have anybody say anything to me against Assange. I did have somebody come up and pat me and say, good question. But yeah, no, definitely nobody. I was probably the 10th question. We did like 3 different rounds of questions. And, we kind of waited to see if anybody would ask the question before us. There were different people of all ages. Yeah, it's definitely not a topic that's on a lot of people's mind. And of course, as we're seeing these candidates, they do not want to acknowledge that this is something that they are up to speed on either.
I've seen that video. I saw you asking the question, but I didn't pick up on the audience or the attendees laughing until we were just watching it there. That was interesting. I also thought, this guy had quite the guts, I guess, to say that journalists made his life more difficult as a governor. That was interesting. And of course, he acknowledged that, yes, that's journalists' duty, is to be a check on power. But I thought that was really interesting. It's such a cop-out to say that they don't know. And the appropriate response to that is to say, you know what, I do not know about that. But if they really didn't, to say, I do not know about this issue. However, I'm going to research this and I'm going to look into this and I'll issue a statement later on to answer your question. That would be the appropriate response.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Dak just released the Tom Steyer video today, and his response is very similar. He does say at the end that if you send me information, I will look into it. But it's very, I don't know, Tom Steyer is just this like caricature of this like anti-Trump billionaire. But yeah, and that's the thing is
we could probably get them on the vigils if we frame it as coming on to bash Trump about his war on journalism and things. Like we might be able to trick Tom Steyer because he's some weird.
I was concerned about the Trump administration's war on journalism, and it's still not enough to get them to really speak out against Trump in that way. Even though they're speaking out against Trump on everything else, they're still not quite ready to like say they're against this one thing that Trump's doing. So yeah, it really goes back to the theory that ultimately they do agree with Trump on this.
So I personally think that Deval Patrick is in the race because otherwise Bernie might just clean house in Massachusetts. I don't think Elizabeth Warren is that popular in her own state. Her last election bore that one out. I think and he also represents another one of Barack Obama's chess pieces on the DNC presidential candidate board. He's got Buttigieg. He's maybe got Biden, although I'm not sure if anyone has Biden. And now Deval Patrick, and then Hillary Clinton, of course, has Elizabeth Warren, and she had Kamala Harris. She has Amy Klobuchar. By the way, she said pell-mell last night in the debate, and it is goddamn 2020. Who says pell-mell in 2020?
But what did she say?
Elizabeth Warren said mamas and daddies, so she was really trying to appeal to the down-home Iowans.
This out, whatever consultant or advisor told Elizabeth Warren to slip into bad Southern accent every time she said mamas and daddies.
Okay, I want to publicly state nobody in Iowa who's a native Iowan has a Southern accent. For some reason, mainstream culture, pop culture, Hollywood, these politicians think we're the South and like to throw in a Southern draw.
Because they equate farming with the South.
Yeah, that's not the Iowan accent, and it's like nails on a chalkboard when you have Elizabeth Warren like trying to like chip in these like good old country mamas and papas kind of thing. You can see it, it's evident, and Amy Klobuchar kind of does it a little bit too, and she's from Minnesota, and she really tries to play up that she's this Midwestern gal, and it's just
I know. It's so irritating that these people try to pretend that they're an average person, because we know that they're not an average person, and it's very dishonest when they try to put on that facade, and people see right through it, and it doesn't it doesn't work well with voters, I don't think. And also it just doesn't.
And not everybody in Iowa lives on a farm, and Des Moines is like 500,000 people with all the suburbs, and it's just like you're just speaking to this like stereotype that you think exists here, and I'm sure they do it in other states too, but
Cedar Rapids has more native Chicagoans than it does Iowans.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's a big part of the eastern part of Iowa has a lot of Chicago transplants, and Des Moines gets listed on every up and coming new city for young generations, young professionals, young people to start a family. It's just, they think we're all living in cornfields. That is not how it is here. It's just.
Hey, look, I grew up in central Indiana, and there literally is cornfields surrounding all the three sides of the subdivision where I grew up. But if you go like 8 miles into town, it used to be a GM town.
Right.
It once was a factory town. Chris Hedges actually mentions it in America, the Farewell Tour, discusses my hometown briefly,
Nice.
talking
Nice.
about how it was one of the utter victims of Bill Clinton and NAFTA, because it was. And that's right
Yeah.
when I was in high school. That's right when I was getting out. I had a ton of friends that went through they had a internship program, and if you were going to like VOTEC or something like that, then you went right into GM. There would be parents and grandparents and whatnot. I mean, it was it was a GM town. And
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in small town Iowa. I grew up in a town of less than 1,000 people, and there were cornfields all around the small town that was about a mile wide. But that there are major cities in Iowa, or considerable for the Midwest, and yeah, I think it's a little
patronizing and demeaning.
that's like, I was just going to exactly say those words to do that when they come here. And they had the debate at Drake University. It's one of the smaller universities in Iowa. There are two bigger ones than Drake, but that is the university here in Des Moines. And yeah, I'm just not really sure who is telling them to use this sort of like draw and language in the middle of a major metropolitan city, the biggest city in Iowa, and that is somehow gonna pull you in voters. I don't know.
It reminds me of when Mitt Romney had his dog strapped to the top of his car. That's like the most memorable thing to me from political campaigns in my lifetime. And then trying to spin it like, doesn't everyone put their dog on top of the car?
Right. I mean, they all come here to the Iowa State Fair. They all, eat the corn dogs, and they all try to like do like the Iowa Fair cliche things. And I think it's just this. Yeah, I mean, both sides do it, so it's frustrating, and I'm sure everybody else feels that.
And like nobody does, like that's a character that people in Iowa play when they go to the fair. Just as like, okay, well, it's traditional to be a fucking, a bumpkin here. Like that's just what we're doing. But when we go home, we're going to go home to our apartment or our house in the city, and it's where we have the running water and the indoor plumbing. It's terrible. But specifically, whoever's telling Elizabeth Warren to do that, they hate her. They don't like her at all, because it is cringeworthy to hear her talk like that. She becomes more insincere the thicker the accent gets.
Yeah, and I know she's definitely trying to play up the women vote here.
Well, she already won the Native American vote, right? So now she's going for the Southerner vote and making sure she can get that one in the bag too.
She's definitely trying to play up to mothers and women here, and that is, I think, yeah.
Oh, you don't say. Like I couldn't realize she was trying to play it up with women.
She was doing that, could you?
My new favorite Elizabeth Warren joke is, so I just bought a Jeep, and I'm gonna name it Elizabeth Warren because it's all white, but it still says it's a Cherokee.
It's a good one.
Do we want to talk about the article about the Ninth Circuit Court?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll get on pulling that up. It'll take a second to load because, pretty sure.
But I really think that Elizabeth Warren was their token to get all of the minorities on stage. I really think that was the play that they were going for. Like as bad as it is. Yeah. But I think that's what they were trying to do, and then that whole process just got monkey wrenched, and that person just got turned into the laughing stock.
Like Donald Trump.
Right.
Donald Trump trolled Elizabeth Warren into proving that she was a complete bald-faced liar who took unfair advantage of affirmative action, who took unfair advantage of Harvard, who took unfair advantage wherever she went to college when she listed herself as a Native American. She exploited an entire group of people for her own personal gain. Like growing up and just starting to become an adult. Do you think that in the ensuing 50 years, she became a better person because she's got a voting record to prove that she doesn't? Like I was on Nico House's show yesterday for a little bit. We talked about this a little bit. It is mind-boggling to me that people just in the last 72 hours figured out that Elizabeth Warren isn't some sort of progressive ally. And among those, Kyle Kulinski and Aaron Mate.
Yeah.
Both were like, oh yeah, no, I gave her way more. Are you living under a rock for the last at least 8-9 years? Like,
I was shocked to see some of these people come out and be like, huh, it's not as good as I thought.
For a lot of people, history starts in 2016. Every sin from before 2016 was forgiven by a lot of people because they were willing to make a compromise based on someone they believed in that was seeking political power.
And to the centrist Democrats, history didn't start until November 9th, 2016. And if history occurred before that, it's only to reinforce the narrative that the Democrats are the good guys. So I'm going to bring up the article about the Ninth Circuit Court.
I like bashing Democrats. I could do that all day.
You what now?
Bashing Democrats?
Oh, sure. I mean, at this point, it's kind of punching down, except for they have all the money and the power.
Right.
So
can you zoom in a little bit? It's kind of hard to read.
Yeah, I will. To set this up a little bit, now I can zoom easier. Oh, God damn it. Not that much. So a divided appeals court reversed an order quashing a Guantanamo Bay detainee's subpoena for details of his treatment while held at a Central Intelligence Agency black site in Poland for use in a foreign investigation into his alleged torture. Where the hell did the article go? Oh, God damn it. Did they really put this behind a paywall?
Oh, man.
Because it wasn't on a paywall when it was open on the laptop the other day. Like, that's how I got the actual idea to do. So basically, all right, so let's just let me kind of let you know what the gist of it is. A torture victim was suing the CIA for the torture that he received. And the CIA came out and said, well, no, because if we have to go through this, then we're going to be compromising national security. Discussing the torture program that is no longer supposed to be a thing would in no way, shape, or form be a breach of national security, but that's not even the point. The point is that the Ninth Circuit Court said, not everything falls under the umbrella of national security, particularly if it's something that you're embarrassed about. If that's the crux of it, that you don't want to get this out, you don't want this information to come out because you think it makes you look bad, that doesn't count. And this is something that Julian Assange's legal team can point to, this ruling in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. and say, look, we have one precedent set with Judge Kettle's dismissal of the DNC's lawsuit against WikiLeaks and Julian Assange, where he cited the Pentagon Papers and said, no, just because it says something you don't want it to say, that's not a reason. He dismissed that lawsuit with prejudice. Now we have the Ninth Circuit Court coming in and saying basically the same thing. This information is going to be able to be used in a trial. This information is going to be made public because you tortured this man for embarrassing you. So it presents, I guess, an opportunity to kind of kindly and politely, let Julian's legal team know that you know about this too, and that it's a pretty short, straight line to draw between this ruling, Judge Kettle's ruling, and their incorporation of it into Julian's defense.
And I think things like this are super pivotal too, because the defense team itself isn't the biggest team in the whole world. They are just really, really dedicated and really, really skilled at what they do. So any type of citizen research and stuff like this is awesome to help them out. So I think it's really, really cool that this article happened. But we do have a couple people to say thank you to. We have Natalie Williams, Edward West, and Eslyn Westby, if I can pronounce that name right. They donated to help the GoFundMe to get Taylor and Steve to London and me and Christy to DC. So I just want to say thank you very much for contributing to that.
And double shout out to Ed, because I know for a fact that he's donated before. I met Ed when Ron Placone came to do stand-up here. Ed's a very nice guy.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for donating. Again, we are kind of in crunch time here, so thank you.
Yeah, and if you can't donate, but you dig what we're doing and you feel like it's a worthwhile cause to support, please share the link, because that helps too. It really does. Tell your friends about this show. Tell your friends about my show. And yeah, let's get this out there. Let's see if we can. There's like 50 or 60 shares on it. Let's see if we can't get it to over 100 shares by the next time you guys see us. That would be awesome. And I will pull that interview up. Give me just a minute and find something to talk about.
Cool. So yeah, we're gonna queue up the interview from when Christy and I were on Redacted Tonight VIP. I actually have a correction to make from that. When I was talking about Chelsea Manning, I said that she spent like 27% of the last decade in prison. It should have been 77%.
7%.
So I said that wrong, and in retrospect, it was just because I was super freaking nervous being on like a real TV studio with Lee Camp. So I tried not to fangirl too hard when I met him.
It was sort of surreal. Yeah, you guys got to meet Rick Sanchez too while I was in hair and makeup, and
Christine
Her
and Andrew,
you know,
two activists working hard.
Please stop. Laptop.
Life and regain his
This is
freedom.
insane.
we're just gonna listen to it.
This is flattering.
Ori. Jeez. My computer is not cooperating. Okay, now I can pull it up.
Cool.
But I'm just gonna let it play. Are we watching the whole thing? Is that a thing?
I don't know. It's like 15 minutes long. I don't know how much of it we want to watch.
Andrew, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to get to all the details and everything, the new updates on what's going on with Julian Assange, but I want to start with a broad question. I have often recommended that people that want to create change, Americans, could be other countries that want to create a better world, they find their thing, their area that they're passionate about, and they get involved and do the most they can in that area. you guys, at least for part of your time, have picked Assange as your main thrust, as your main passion. What is it about Julian Assange that made this your area that you were going to work on and really strive to regain his freedom?
Well, for me, WikiLeaks and Julian Assange is something I've followed on and off through the years, and especially in March of 2018 when he was gagged in the embassy, and then it just became
When he was arrested.
Well, this is even before, when he was back in the embassy. His rights were just slowly being violated. And at that time, Unity for Jay was starting to come up and ask for volunteers. And I got to the point where I just could not do anything. And so I started volunteering with Unity for Jay. And then, we ushered in 2019 essentially with his arrest. And it just became more and more evident that we had to do something on the U.S. side to start rallying support, that we don't support our government doing this to a journalist and a publisher.
Yeah. Andrew?
For me, it's really because the struggle for WikiLeaks is ending the global, apartheid state, the global imperialism. It's getting at the core of actually restoring freedom and guaranteeing it to everybody. It's the basic struggle for human rights across the world. And, more importantly, it's interconnected to every other activist struggle. Because if you don't have the ability to communicate and share ideas and give accurate information, you can't find out about immigrants getting killed at the border. You can't find out about detention camps. You can't find out about the decisions of multinational corporations that happen in the dark. So it's really, for me, it's about making sure that everyone can have that underlying foundation of speech regardless of what it is. And it's just through fighting for Julian and WikiLeaks that I get to do that.
Yeah, that's so important. And the information he brought forward, proof of war crimes and all kinds of crimes, not just war crimes. He's the epitome of a political prisoner.
Absolutely.
Imprisoned for what he revealed to us, for revealing the truth. So most people know that he's no longer in the Ecuadorian embassy. He's now been arrested nearly a year now, or something like that, in Belmarsh prison in England, and he's got his extradition trial coming up. What's going on in the case? What are the next steps?
Yeah, so there's a couple case management hearings through January, but the big hearing starts February 24th. Now it's been estimated it's going to be about 4 weeks, and those may not be consecutive, so we don't know how long this hearing is actually going to last. And then after that, there will be an appeals process of some kind, probably on either side, depending on the ruling. So this
they've already shown, that judge has already shown that it's not going to be favorable to...
Right. We've seen since his arrest, these hearings in the UK are not following rule of law. They are not paying any attention as far as he's unable to prepare for his defense. His health is declining. He's in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day, and they don't really seem to care that this is putting him at a disadvantage to prepare for this hearing.
And the basis of it, why is he even still in prison? They claim they're holding him for jumping bail, but now it's on charges, or they weren't even charges, it's on investigation that's been dropped by the Swedish prosecutor.
They don't even have the bail charge anymore, actually.
Yeah, that's expired now.
At this point, it's 100% in jail for a political purpose, and that is to keep him silent and to slowly torture him.
That's...
Right. It's just so incredible and horrifying. Explain to people why there is such a fight to make sure he's not extradited to the U.S. I think a lot of people that aren't informed maybe about this or aren't informed about how whistleblowers are treated here in the U.S. may be like, well, so he gets extradited to the U.S. and he has a trial here. What's the big deal? Why is there a fight against extradition?
If you look at how Chelsea Manning's been treated over the last decade, she spent 27% of that decade in some type of prison or jail establishment. Mm-hmm. She spent 10% of the decade, so almost a year, actually in solitary confinement herself. So
which is torture.
Right, and Julian wouldn't be treated any differently. He would come here, go to a black site, and then just be gone.
Essentially a show trial, getting put away for 175 years, there would be no justice. There's no justice being served in the UK right now in this process. We're certainly not going to see it, and we haven't seen it for other whistleblowers here.
The level of corruption in the UK has gotten so bad that judges are sitting there ruling over Julian's case, walking to the back of the room, meeting with the Americans, and then walking back up to make decisions.
Yeah, and you mentioned one whistleblower, Chelsea Manning. Another one that you and I have worked with is John Kiriakou, who in his trial here in Arlington, Virginia, they wouldn't let him bring any evidence in. So he's going to be, Assange will be treated exactly the same. No evidence allowed, just a banana court, really.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And this isn't anything new for the way that we treat whistleblowers. This goes all the way back to where this same instance, this same kind of thing happened 50 years ago with another whistleblower who they just let die in jail so they didn't have to take him to court. So this isn't even new for the almost just American empire's way of dealing with problems of people speaking out about their crimes.
You mentioned earlier his health. A lot of people have been talking about that. What are the latest updates with his health, and how did he end up ill?
Yeah, so, I mean, he's been under a lot of different medical conditions in the embassy that he could not receive treatment for because he could not leave the embassy to go to a hospital. Now that he's in Belmarsh, he's in the healthcare ward, but I don't know what great quality he's getting because every time we see him in the public, he looks worse and worse. On Christmas Eve, he called Vaughn Smith, who's the founder of the Frontline Club in London, and essentially said, "I'm slowly dying here in prison." And Vaughn expressed that Julian, who's very clearly articulate, very well-spoken, was slurring his words and sounded medicated or sedated. So, you know, we don't know exactly what's going on there, but we have Nils Meltzer, who's, you know, essentially said he's being psychologically tortured in Belmarsh.
Yeah, a lot of doctors have stood up and said that his treatment is a crime.
Yes.
I mean, his health.
There's actually letters circulating it's called the Doctors for Assange group, where they're getting letters together, sending them out to prominent people, prominent government organizations, just trying to raise awareness and get other doctors to stand up and speak out too.
This may be a kind of obvious question, but we have this ridiculous Democratic presidential primary going on right now. It's been going on for about 3.5 years now. And what have the Democratic candidates said about Assange?
So one of the co-hosts to our vigils actually did a really, really good piece. Her name's Taylor Hudak. And she went and found all of the different footages and statements put out by the candidates. And the only candidate that actually said something in support of Julian, as most people who watch probably know, is Tulsi Gabbard. But outside the Democratic Party,
She said he should be freed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that she would pardon him, she would dismiss charges, yes.
But you actually find more support for him outside of the Democratic Party with people like Adam Kokesh, Dario Hunter, and then even Howie Hawkins as third-party candidates.
That's the Libertarian Green Party, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's despicable that these, Democratic candidates say that he should face a trial here in the U.S., which basically means just be brought here to be tortured. And talk about the fact that on its face, the idea that he should come to the U.S. for a trial is laughable because this is not a U.S. citizen who has never operated within the U.S. Why? Why are we allowed to grab him and put him in a U.S. trial?
Because he committed the crime of revealing the crimes of the rich and the powerful. It wasn't anything beyond him saying, look at these people that you bombed for profit. Look at these environments that you destroyed for the sake of corporations. And then even like recently they released, it's called Fish Rot. It showed how, I believe it was Nigeria or one of the African countries was literally just selling off fishing land to the highest bidder. It wasn't based on like population control or anything. That this corporation just stepped in and decided, hey, we're just taking all the fish. And the government just signed off on it. So it's not even that WikiLeaks is fighting just the Americans with the OPCW leaks and that stuff. It's a global force to say, hey, these are what your leaders are doing in the world. What are you going to do about it?
Because of the propaganda we get here on the corporate media, a lot of people think that Assange just went after America and, just went after Hillary Clinton or something, when in fact he revealed the crimes and the corruptions of U.S., China, France, Germany, Deutsche Bank, a lot of the big banks, Russia. There's so many different things he's revealed, or WikiLeaks has revealed. It's not, like you said, it's not just against America.
I always invite people to go to wikileaks.org and look at the leaks. Type in any country, politician, whatever. You're going to find thousands of documents, and they have 100% accuracy rate. So yeah, a lot of people think it's just the DNC, it's just Hillary that he put Trump in office, when really he's been exposing corruption and crimes for the better part of a decade now.
Right. Talk about the next steps. When's the next Free Assange Vigil? What protests are you working on? How people can get involved?
So we do a live stream every Wednesday at 10 p.m. Eastern on YouTube. You can find us at Action for Assange on Twitter as well. And then also for the last week of February, which is the first week of Julian's extradition hearing, we're going to be doing protests here in D.C. from the 24th to the 29th
Of February.
And it'll be at places like outside of the Department of Justice, outside of Amnesty International, because they haven't spoken up in support of Julian yet, outside of the DOJ, and just selective targets, like even outside of the CIA and then outside of Chelsea Manning's prison in the Eastern District of Virginia.
This is something we didn't even get to. Yeah. Chelsea Manning is back in jail, being charged, what, $1,000
a day
for this ridiculous grand jury idiocy, where they're basically saying, tell us lies about Julian Assange, or else we won't let you out. It's
and her testimony is already public record.
Right.
She already testified and told them everything that they would need to know in this case. Yeah.
It's a perjury trap. I'm trying to get her to speak against Julian and WikiLeaks, and she's refusing to cooperate. And so, yeah, she's back in prison and being fined for it until she cooperates.
Yeah, it's revolting. So what, people will be seeing this all over the world. If they can't make it to DC, or even if they can, what website, how can people get involved?
So the first thing is we like promoting the idea of decentralized activism, where you don't have to go to a major city to be at a protest. You can be the one person protesting in your town. Walk around, put up flyers on telephone poles, put up signs, get yard signs and put them in there. So the first thing is do what you can with the time and money that you have. And then we do have like our live events every Wednesday. We are transitioning to try to get town halls set up as well, which would be local events around the vigils each week just to help with community organizing. But if you're interested in connecting with us directly, you can go to action4assange.com. And that's where you can find us on there.
Action4assange.com.
And we really want to take this opportunity to get U.S. supporters. If you can come to D.C., join us, help us peacefully protest and show our government that we support WikiLeaks, we support free speech, we support free press, and we do not want to see Julian Assange brought here. We don't want to see him die in prison. He should be freed, and we really thought this would be a great opportunity to gather as many people in D.C. as possible.
Thank you, Christine, Andrew, really appreciate it. Keep fighting.
Thank you.
Nice job, guys. Great job. Really proud of that. I thought it was great. I watched it live. It was really exciting to see you guys, and a big thank you to Lee Camp and RT for consistently talking about Julian Assange and being on the right side of this issue as well. And you guys did a fantastic job, and I'm really, really proud of you both. I am, because you did great.
Thank you. I recently did a video with Pierce this weekend, and we talked specifically about, isn't it interesting that RT is one of the only bigger media conglomerates that will give us a voice and give Julian Assange accurate reporting. We were just really thankful to connect with Lee and be invited to come onto his show, and really trying to promote the DC actions, but not only that, promoting the vigil, promoting and talking about what is happening to Julian and his health and the extradition hearing, because a lot of people in America don't know much about it.
Right, exactly. And I mean, you guys are, well, all of us are leading the way with the movement in the United States. And it's really important that be a very strategic and effective campaign. And with that comes an emphasis on not causing drama and not creating issues and leaving that out of there. Because when you start causing drama and you start causing problems, number one, that's typical of an agent. It's J-Trig methods. It makes people not want to work with you, and nor should they have to work with you. And also, you're taking away from what's most important here, and that is saving Julian Assange's life and ensuring that he is not extradited to the United States. So when, by doing these things and by trying to in being bothered by people who are starting problems. It's really irresponsible, it's ineffective, and it shows who the bad actors are.
Yeah, I think we are, of course, in the last few months, we've seen a lot of that creep up. And I think it's only going to increase as we get closer to the extradition hearing. And I really advise people just to be aware and to not engage with the drama and not engage with the mudslinging, and really keep your focus on Julian.
And this goes even as far as how you interact with other groups too. Because I don't want to point to any specific instances or anything, but we had some supporters that had an issue that someone in a different group had an issue with them with, and I don't know the details. I don't know anything about it, but in situations like that, it's generally best to just let it handle itself, essentially. Because you'll more or less see who's the person trying to create the drama and who's the person that actually has legitimate concerns that need aired. So I think that's something that's really important to listen to as well. Because there's going to be a lot of different people and a lot of different personalities and a lot of different people that believe in the core same things, but may have a different philosophy on the world than what we hold and what the role of government should be, and all these different things that can cause divisions among people. So make sure that when you're organizing, you keep it as issue specific and centered around the fact that, like, we're here to build something together so we can have the ability to express these differences and ideas.
Yeah, and that's just a part of having just knowing how best to handle yourself in these activism situations. It's best to always keep your focus on what's really, really important here. And because this time it's really, really crucial.
Mm-hmm. So I think we can maybe segue a little bit into Julian Assange's recent court update on January 13th, this past Monday. It was a little late notice. Thankfully, we have these amazing activists in London who caught it in time to rally people to get there, that Julian Assange was actually going to appear at court. Really, we had thought that all of the case management hearings in January he would likely be doing via video link. And this one originally was scheduled for the 14th and then got moved. And as we saw, Julian's lawyers specifically kind of mentioned that confusing mix-up, and that they are not getting enough time with him to go over the court documents that need to be turned in. I believe the first set was supposed to be turned in, or is supposed to be turned in by the 18th. They're expressing that in Belmarsh, they are having a very hard time getting access to him. Maybe they've only had 2 hours with him since the previous case management hearing in December. And I even read that some of the U.S. prosecutors were trying to assist them with Belmarsh's limiting ability for them to have access to him. We did actually get some pictures and video footage of Julian in the van from, I believe it when he was going back to Belmarsh. And I do have to say he did look a little bit better. He was smiling. He didn't seem quite as maybe spacey is the right word. He seemed pretty well cognitively with it. Go ahead.
Drugged. He didn't look
drugged.
drugged. And
He
we
did
know
look drugged.
he's been being drugged because of the phone call he made on Christmas to his friend.
Yeah.
I played it's on my Twitter. I can go find it if we don't get it in the chat here in a minute. But I played it on my show the other day after I had on Eleanor Goldfield, which is a wonderful conversation, and you should go watch it at some point. Yeah, here we go. So I will pull this up. But yeah, I mean, really, I was struck hopeful by the way that he looked. I was. And I will have this clip ready in just a second. I wonder if my computer is going to behave this time.
Let me give you some
Nope.
advice.
Jesus. And like it's muted too, but it's still playing sound. Kevin!
I was just gonna say, Kevin. All Kevin's fault.
So, did we know if any of the reports came out that they had multiple decoy vans like they did at previous times where they had Julian out to actually go to the court itself?
I don't know, because it didn't seem like they got any footage of him coming into the court. And from what the tweets I saw that morning, they didn't think he was there. Then all of a sudden he was walking into the courtroom. So I'm not quite sure what happened as far as tracking him coming in, but I believe this is coming out.
Julian, stay strong. Stay strong, Julian. We're fighting for you. We won't let them do it to you. We won't let them do this to you. Stay strong. Remember, we're here for you. Remember that. Stay strong. You will be free. Governments will not win. Wow, I can't believe it. You can talk. Talk. You can talk. Stay strong. Stay strong. It's gonna be alright. Stay strong, Julian. Remember, we're here. We're here for you. We won't let them do this to you. Because your freedom is our freedom.
Yeah, when I saw that video, it made me very happy that he was at least able to see that he was getting support. I mean, he was nodding his head, which indicated to me that he knew that that was somebody who was showing support for him. Although it does appear that he wasn't really able to hear what this person was saying. It seems that he did understand that this was a positive message, and he did seem encouraged by that, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even though, I mean, obviously he did look a little bit better. He did not look drugged. It's still really hard seeing him this way. And I think even hearing the supporter's voice in the background made it even more like just heart-wrenching that, you know, he is in the position that he's in. And we're just really trying to, whether it's by letters or people going to the magistrate's court and being there, really trying to show him that we on the outside have not forgotten him.
No, and you're right. I agree. I still, every time I've seen that clip, I feel a little gut punchy when I hear what is being said to him with the full knowledge of why it's being said to him. And which, I mean, honestly, there's no excuse for anyone running for office to not feel that way. There's no excuse for anyone who supports anyone running for office to not want their candidate to speak up on Julian's behalf. And if we're going to be action for Assange, I'm going to continue to encourage the people that believe the progressive axiom Bernie listens to his base and we can move him to the left, to please reach out to everyone in that campaign and move them to the left. I mean, clearly I'm not going to be the guy that does that. You know, I will ask for it to happen because I genuinely believe that someone needs to, someone who isn't getting Tulsi Gabbarded right now.
And he's surrounded by people that at one point throughout their career have spoken up in favor of Julian Assange. Almost every person at the height of his campaign staff and the people directly around him, his media advisors, have all spoken up except now. Except in this time, they haven't. And that's the thing. That's the craziest part of the whole situation, is we can see the bullshit on the DNC debate stage. We can read the emails about how they time release stories and try to rig the framing of a debate. And then you see Julian in jail. And it's what you're not seeing on the mainstream media. And for like all of this to be happening at the same time, and for one of it to be held legitimate and the other one to be cast aside, like that just, like that's why we do this, is because there's no one else trying to make as much noise as possible about
And
this
as much
situation.
noise as possible needs to be made. And it's not just mainstream media, it's a disappointing number of progressive or independent or, truth community or whatever the alt-right calls themselves these days. Like,
And even when they reference the work of WikiLeaks, they won't say the name WikiLeaks for insert reason.
Which would be inappropriate in any other situation. If a news organization were to break a story or publish something, it would always be the appropriate practice to reference that organization. That's extremely unacceptable for them not to reference. And you're right, they do it all the time.
The only person who consistently uses the word WikiLeaks when she discusses Julian Assange is Rachel Maddow, and she sneers the word WikiLeaks because she will not say Julian Assange's name. He's always the WikiLeaks guy. Oh.
And that's because over the last decade, there's been such a controlled effort to separate the name Julian and WikiLeaks. Because when you first engage someone that hasn't been paying that much attention, you said, hey, do you know Julian Assange is in prison? And they're like, who's Julian Assange? Like, I just moved to this town. Like, I don't know about that. And you're like, he was the publisher of WikiLeaks. And they're like, oh shit, he's in prison? Like, it's crazy.
When I had one experience when I mailed a letter to Julian, the people working at the post office asked me if I was mailing a letter to my son. It was just really bizarre, and I was just like, no. Julian Assange is the founder and publisher of WikiLeaks, and kind of explaining the situation and the campaign that I volunteer for. And eventually they were like, oh yeah, like I've seen him on TV. And then I brought up Chelsea Manning and started talking about that. And then finally they were like, well, why are these people in prison if they're telling us the truth? And I said, well, that's your government that's doing that. So yeah, it's kind of amazing that there has been this disconnect made, and that Julian Assange's name is no longer synonymous with WikiLeaks to some people. Or when you say his name, it goes to this sort of this rapist smear of this like narcissistic man who is put Trump in office too. So
that's what I was gonna say. It can be the rapist smears. It can be that he put U.S. troops in danger smears. It could be that he didn't properly redact information and threatened U.S. relationships abroad smears. It could be all of these things that ultimately aren't true.
Right. And we've seen countless time and time again. I think every time I've done any sort of Assange action out in public, I've either been berated by people or have people say, oh, that he's creepy, or how would you like it if your emails were exposed? And then there was stuff yelled about Russia at us, and it's just sort of this never ending beratement of the top 5 smears. Like, you could just count on somebody saying one of them. And like we've said before, the information war against Julian Assange in this country has been very successful in poisoning the minds of the people of this country.
I hope I didn't send Gordon in too much of a spiral by telling him to read the Gulf of Aden emails. I thought about that afterwards, and I was like, oh man, if he actually reads that, his whole world's gonna change.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. So do we have more news that we want to be covering?
I think we just have, last on the list is the call out dates for the actions.
Okay.
Yeah, there is the big a big action happening January 25th. Many of the cities are doing a solidarity action with yellow vests and are trying to incorporate yellow vests into their action. I believe in Australia is Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide, Alice Springs, as well as Wellington, New Zealand. I believe Austria is looking at getting a location. Ontario, Canada, Denver, San Francisco. So another big date coming up if you are looking for a date to do an action is January 25th. And then of course, please be looking ahead if you are in the US and you would like to come to Washington, DC, we will be there hosting actions, peacefully protesting February 24th through the 28th. We are planning on marching from the White House to the DOJ and conveniently passing by Trump Tower on the way. We want to go to some different media organizations in DC and kind of peacefully protest, but peacefully shame them for not covering this better. We also want to get out to Chelsea Manning's prison. Jeremy Hammond, I believe, is still there as well. And then also get to Capitol Hill, Supreme Court. And then we are planning on ending the week back at the White House and the DOJ too, just to make sure our presence is well known. So yeah, we have a lot of plans in store for DC. If you cannot make it to DC, please plan an action where you are during the extradition hearing. It doesn't matter if you're in London or DC, you can still make a difference and still help educate people on what's going on and alert people that this extradition hearing is going on, because we can't depend on the mainstream media to accurately report on it.
And another really good thing here in the
Real
US.
quick, the 25th of January, I will be in San Francisco.
Awesome.
I'm going to be hooking up with Steve Zeltzer, who runs Bay Area for Assange, and we'll be streaming as much of that event as possible. He is prepared to put forth that week, the 24th through the 28th, as an international call to action. So expect events to be listed in correlation with the February 24th kickoff of the hearing. I would like to co-sign that. I think there should be an international day of action for that. And
yeah, the Don't Extradite Assange campaign is calling for an international day of action as well. So yeah, we want to see actions everywhere, honestly.
Yeah, and remember, like, if there's not a protest in your town, be the protest in your town.
And Monday is Martin Luther King Day. There is parades across the country. There is organizer group meetups. And it's a great time to go out and build allies and to show that you care just as much about their issue and want to educate them also about what's happening and the issues that you care about. So I think that on Monday, it's a great way to find a way to reach out to your community. If you've been someone that's trying to figure out how to get involved, there's always community events based around Martin Luther King Day, and it's a great day to talk about the need for us to organize together.
Yeah, it's important that whatever event, whatever, march, parade, or protest that you're going to, you incorporate the necessity to have a free press, or at least the veneer of the free press that we still have. This is always going to be about more than Julian Assange, and our ability to get and receive and to give information that runs counter to the narrative is vital. If we lose Julian Assange and WikiLeaks is deplatformed, put out of existence, do you really think that the Washington Post is going to go digging into the underlying circumstances as a why? Or are they going to see what happened to him and play freaking ball for the rest of their days.
Right. They're going to do what the government wants them to do and wants to come from this case, and they'll do nothing. Of course.
And I don't think I've talked about it in a while, but the power that the American government would gain for a legal basis would literally give them the ability to plug out almost any journalist from any institution for any national security stuff or wartime information that they published. That allows them to go back through history and say, we didn't like you, insert person, when you published this about the war in Iraq. We didn't like how you called out our WMDs. So the next time someone gets fired from MSNBC, they get arrested at the same time because they're violating the Espionage Act as laid out by Julian's case by communicating this information to the American public. So I think that that's something that's really important too, is they'll literally be able to walk out any journalist from any institution almost around the world for whatever reason they decide.
Yeah. Do we want to wrap it up, or do we have anything else you want to touch on? Okay. I'll start. So thank you everybody for tuning in on this vigil. If you were new, do know that we go live every Wednesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Action for Assange YouTube channel. A big thank you to Gordon Dimmack for collaborating with us, and Jason Burmis as well, our guest, for coming on and also streaming, as well as Jason Carney with the people of the 99%. Thank you. And again, thank you everybody for watching. Thank you everybody who has donated to our campaign or to our GoFundMe and campaign, our GoFundMe, and for supporting Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning. My name is Taylor Hudak, and you can follow me on Twitter at _Taylor Hudak. And also, if you are not following the 1 versus 5I campaign, please do follow the campaign at the number 1, the letters VS, the number 5, the letter I. It is all about journalist and activist Susie Dawson taking on the Five Eyes intelligence agencies in a court of law. Also follow that initiative on Twitter at Protect Susie, I believe the handle is. Do that, sign the open letter, and we're grateful for all of your support. And thank you all for joining us tonight.
Yeah, my name's Andrew Smith. You can find me on Twitter at Andrew Zigmund, Zigmund. And I'm just super excited. I'm looking forward to DC. We have some guests of the show that are helping us get in contact with different organizers for different causes. So we really want to make this a showcase for what free speech actually can be if used properly, and the ability to associate freely. So I'm really looking forward to that. So I want to say thank you to everyone helping out behind the scenes to make this happen.
Yes, we have an amazing group helping to plan DC and going through all of the intimate details of getting to these locations, what materials we will need, and how to make this a successful protest week. My name is Christy Doff. You can follow me at Christy Doff on Twitter. I'm really excited to announce this week that I am starting to do videos with Pierce SSC. You can find his YouTube channel, D Pierce, PEARCE SSC. You can also follow him on Twitter at the same on the same handle. We'll be doing Assange updates. We are having a video coming out about the Iowa caucus, and we'll be covering that the next few weeks as well. So yeah, please subscribe to his channel, follow him on Twitter, and look for those videos coming out throughout the weeks.
And my name is Steve Poikinen. I host a show called Slow News Day here on the YouTubes, which you can find if you type in Slow News Day podcast into the YouTube search bar. Thank you to Jason Burmis for being on tonight, and to my co-hosts. You guys kick ass, and thanks to everyone who tunes in every week, who helps us, get this information out. We love you guys. Again, if you can, please go ahead and share the GoFundMe link. And if you can donate to it, that would be even better. And we will see you soon. Good luck to us all.